A lot of people are calling the Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis trade the worst trade in sports history, but I think there is one that's worse, and it's in the MMA world. MMA equivalent of this trade, but arguably even worse, was the UFC trading Demetrious Johnson for Ben Askren. Sure, Anthony Davis for Luka is pretty unbelievable. I don't know how that happened, but Anthony Davis is still a phenomenal player, probably a top 10 player in the league right now. This trade the UFC did, oh my, that just does not make any sense. Demetrious Johnson is arguably the greatest fighter of all time, and in my mind, without a doubt, a top 5 fighter of all time. They traded him for Ben Askren. This is a guy who had a lot of hype. He actually had a pretty decent Bellator and outside of the UFC career, but when he came into the UFC, it was embarrassment after embarrassment. The UFC would give up their greatest flyweight and arguably greatest fighter of all time for a guy who got one win in the UFC, had that embarrassing fastest KO loss in history to Jorge Masvidal, and only had one total win. Let me tell you why this trade was worse, because Demetrious Johnson was higher on the all-time MMA list by far than Luka Doncic is on the NBA list, and Anthony Davis is also way higher on the NBA list than Ben Askren is on the MMA list.